Y'all awake? Good morning out there. Hey, Teresa, and hey, Kelly. Good to see you there this morning. Glad you're here already. And let me get my mic feels like it's in my face, like it's blocking things today. It always seems everything's in a different position, but that's okay. So my lights are all about the same. No, I don't have blue hair. It's just the blue light up there. Boom. So good morning. So you just got up crawling down to put Joe on, huh? All right. Good to have you. Hey, Roger. Good to see you, brother. Good morning. And let me take my first sip of coffee with you all, or my second. I took my first as we were coming in. And as you can see, well, I think I'm always casual. I try to be professional and casual, but 6 a.m, we're going to be a little more casual, but I want to also make a good presentation for you. I have my hair combed, and my eyes are still half shut, despite having been awake for at least 45 minutes. And I must be enunciating while I'm spitting. Hey, Audrey, where it's 4 o'clock in the morning. What are you doing up so early? Or are you just a up all night kind of woman? And I just want to say this is our second morning show, and this is to be an exclusive members only show. However, there's something with YouTube. There is something in the settings that will not allow me to do the live stream to just my members and allow there to be a chat room that works, even though I've clicked on the buttons that say allow live chat. Only members can chat. That keeps anybody who wanders in from not being able to see it, from being able to see it. At the same time, it's marked for display to members only. So this is your members only show. This is your perk for being a member. This is one of the perks. And the problem is I can't get it to work with their technology. For some reason, I've gone through the tutorial videos from a couple of different people that do this. I've gone through having the live, and it still comes up saying that my live chat is disabled, and that I usually get a screen that says, it's a black screen with a circle and an exclamation point that says, sorry, unable to display this video. It's still processing. But it's not a video. It's a live stream. And so I had to, at the last minute, about 20 minutes ago, I checked that again, and it wasn't working. And so I had to flip the switch and make it a public video. So all of you who are members only, don't feel cheated. You are still the special ones. You are the chosen ones. But the technology at YouTube is not allowing me to do what needs to be done. Despite all the videos I've gone through, the tutorials, and everything I'm doing to make this work correctly, it's not working. So I got to find out why. There's some glitch in there somewhere. And I've got to find out what it is. I even had some of these tutorials I was watching say, now I'm going to show you a part that many people miss this, and YouTube isn't very good at explaining how this stuff works and how you can make it best work. But here's what you have to do. Click this button, and I'm watching intently, and I go, I've done that. I figured that one out. So there it is. Now it looks like I've got Doug messaging me over on my... okay. That's totally unrelated. I thought maybe Doug couldn't get into the chat or something. So, Doug, are you here? Do I see you? I don't see you signed in. So, well, welcome, everybody. There's some mundane talk for our coffee talk this morning. Now, let me ask you, I love getting up in the morning. I love getting up just before the sun rises. I love making my coffee. I love the smell of that. I ground beans this morning and brewed those. I love the smell. I love the taste. And I love when it's warm out. I love going out on the patio and sitting and watching the sunrise. I used to go out and read a book. I'd go out early morning hours, and I would have enough light where I could see the pages, and I would sit outside in the warm weather having coffee. The sun's not quite up yet, and watch the sunrise and read a book. And because I don't have a lot of time to read, how about you guys? Do you have much time to read these days? I find that for being an author and a writer of books, that I have very little time to read recreationally. It's like when I do my artwork. I'm an illustrator, as you all know. If I had my druthers, I would sit and paint pictures and write. But why don't I have a lot of canvases of art hanging all over the place? Because I don't have time to paint. My painting for myself is it's kind of feels like it's on hold, or it always has been, because I have to do commercial art in order to survive. And so all of my oomph on my art goes into commercial. Same with reading. When I do any reading, it's usually reading that's focused on what I do on these radio shows, what I do for books. Like right now, here's a good for instance. And I'm asking you, so let's talk about that as well. Do you have time to read recreationally? Just to say, this is the time of day that I set aside to read, so I can, for whatever reason, just to expand your imagination, expand your knowledge base. Do you have time to do those things that you want to do? And if you don't, what are the things that are eating up your time that don't let you do those things? Audrey loves to read books. I do too. I don't have time. I got to tell you, I was not a voracious reader as a kid either. Here I am as an adult writing books, and I wasn't a voracious reader of books. However, I've got the books that I've read that I've enjoyed. Maybe I've read more than I think I do, because I start to think back, back around 1980, when some of you weren't even born yet, the year my wife was born. I was just out of college, and I was reading Robert Ludlum novels. Robert Ludlum, who wrote the original The Bourne Identity and The Bourne Supremacy, all the Jason Bourne books, which Matt Damon had played Jason Bourne in the movies. They did 2 or 3 movies, I think. And those were all based on Robert Ludlum's novels. And so I voraciously ate up his novels, liked those. I enjoyed reading Leon Uris, Uris, if you don't know who he is. By the way, well, he wrote books like Exodus. If you ever saw the movie, the old movie made in the I want to say it was the late 50s, the movie Exodus with Paul Newman. It was all about the Jews after the Holocaust, coming to Israel before it was the state of Israel, and establishing the state of Israel. And you would think that would sound very weirdly foreign politic type of thing, but it was really a very good movie and an excellent book if you've never read that. Also by Leon Uris was Trinity. It was about the Irish struggles, and he wrote about that. And then he had other books about World War II. One of the most moving books I had read up to that point was a book that Leon Uris wrote called Mila 18. It's a novel. It seemed like a smaller paperback in my memory. And that was around 1980, 81, in that range of time that I picked that up. And it was about the Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto during World War II. And specifically about a brother and a sister who were adults, and they were freedom fighters and so on. And I remember there was a point in that book where it was the first time it had ever happened to me reading a book. It hit me so emotively. I cried, and I had to put the book down and come back to it later. It was so emotionally draining, that particular book. And maybe you go, well, why would I want to read something like that? It's because it's a book about a story that's so well written, it grips your emotions. And it wasn't like documentary or biography. It was fiction. based on, of course, as he would say, based on real events and real people. So you go through a chapter at a time. I saw you say some of my YouTube channels do book readings. Yeah. And that's what I did with my own books. We go through chapter or two at a time and read them on here. And so let's see. Anybody else come in that I missed? No, I haven't seen anybody else enter yet. So good to have you, all of you still, by the way. And so reading books, I don't have as much time to read. What else have I read? A book that I read that really was moving to me, and I think was a book that was a bit of an early catalyst when I was doing a lot of huge theological questioning. Was a book that you might not think would do that. It's a fictional book, historical fiction. It was The Mists of Avalon by Morgan Llewellyn. Thick book, about like that. And if you haven't read The Mists of Avalon, I would highly recommend it. What The Mists of Avalon is a it's a book about the Arthurian legends, King Arthur, only told through the eyes of the women that were part of the story. Teresa has that book. Yeah, Kelly, I love historical fiction. And this book was meticulously researched out by Morgan Llewellyn. And but what it does is it really, how do I want to say, it doesn't build a case for it, because she's not building a case. It presents paganism in its in Great Britain, or the British Isles, at the time when King Arthur would have been a warrior chieftain who came to the fore and united a lot of the tribes and the different kingdoms in England, and right around the 4th to 5th centuries AD. Not the time of knights in shining armor, which is some of the old novelists put King Arthur in the time of the knights in shining armor, but we already know who all those kings were during that period. There were no knights in shining armor at that time when they had the armor like that. This was way back. This is 400 years after the time of Christ. You know, you're coming out of the Byzantine period. Rome was still, the remnants of Rome was still in Great Britain when the Arthurian story would have probably rightfully taken place. And Teresa says, fantastic. Yeah, it's a fantastic novel. If you don't have time to read it, get an audiobook of it. Or even if you watch movies and stuff, go rent the Mists of Avalon. They've condensed it into more or less a 2-hour movie, but there was a mini series that came out at least 10 years ago on that. And yeah, it skips a lot of detail. It has to, but it has the spirit of the book is in it. And so very good book. So I remember reading books like that. I read some of Orson Scott Card's books. See, when I start thinking about it, I think, I guess I've read a lot of books. I used to have a lot more time to read. Most of my reading, my recreational reading, most of it, the bulk of it, came to an end at a certain period in my life. And it was right around the time, I think I can almost date it to the time of my divorce and getting custody of my kids and stuff. That was 19 years ago. And so when that happened, life changed, priorities changed, and so on. So yeah, Teresa, that book takes you away from the fading away of the pagan mystery into the Christianity in a very cool way. It does. It's like I was so excited in 1990. Yeah, it was 1990. So I had to have read the book before that. My ex-wife and I traveled to England for the first time, and we rented a car, and we drove. Her parents came along with us, so we had the 4 of us, and we rented a car, and we drove from Heathrow all the way up to Inverness in Scotland, and over to Pennon, Scotland up on the coast, and back down through the Highlands and different places in England. And I wanted to see Glastonbury and see Glastonbury Tor if you've never seen it. Look up Glastonbury Tor on Google if you've never seen what this place is. Glastonbury, just Glaston Bury, Glastonbury Tor, Tor. And you'll see what this hill is. And there's a big hill called Glastonbury Tor. There's a tower that still stands on the top of Glastonbury Tor from back before the time of Henry VIII. And Glastonbury Tor is in the town of Glastonbury, England. And your ancestors are from there, Teresa. That's very cool. And Glastonbury Tor, why I wanted to see that was in the book, The Mists of Avalon. Glastonbury Tor was where there used to be a cathedral there, and Henry up on top of the mountain, and Henry VIII tore that down in his big reconstruction of British religion. And all that's left is the one tower up on top. And according to The Mists of Avalon, Glastonbury Tor was an island. Now it's just a hill out in the middle of the meadows, but it's a hilly country. And it used to be that was called the Lake District. It still is the Lake District. And once you're up on top of Glastonbury and you look out, you can see that the whole region was a big lake basin. And all these little hills popping up. These were all the little islands that dotted this lake. And Glastonbury was where they built what's the word I'm looking for? Not the home of the priests, but Catholic priests, the church, built their cathedral there. They built or at least a chapel there. And they had a community of priests that lived there. It was called the Isle of Glass, Glastonbury. And according to the legend in the book, if you were of the pagan religion, if you were knew the incantations and the magic and how to, it's almost like in Star Wars, the Force. If you had this ability, you could get on a boat and you would ride out toward the Lake of Glastonbury. And when it was misty, and you could part the mists, and you would be in another dimension. I didn't call it that so much in the book, but it would part, and you'd be at the same place, but it would be the Isle of the priestesses, of the high priestess, and of Avalon. And so Glastonbury Tor is purported to be the island of Avalon, out of Arthurian legend. The veil of the mist would open up. Yeah, exactly, Teresa. And so I read that book, and it was a moving book to me. It was also very moving to read about the old religions and how the new religion was replacing it. They would call them the followers of the white Christ, and how I swear Avalon was real too, Teresa. I don't think there's any doubting of that. Now, what's interesting, and I think I've mentioned this before in passing, but the first time I went to Glastonbury Tor, we parked and we walked through a pasture to get there in a little path. There was nothing built up. It's not a big touristy site, although a lot of people visit it. But there was a little, if I remember right, it was almost like a little picket fence, a short one, and kind of rickety. And, when you walk around England and you do hiking and so on, you just go through all these pastures and fields, and there's always fences to open up and walk through, gates. And there was this little gate, and surrounding, in my memory, was blackberry bushes at the base of the Hill of Avalon, which is up in front of you now. And there was a little plaque about this big, a brass plaque. And on the plaque, it said the Isle of this is Glastonbury Tor, also known as the Isle of Avalon, and connected to the King Arthur legends. And it said right on this little plaque, it said this is it was purported to be the entrance to the netherworld and to the other world of the island of Avalon. And this is back in 1990. I saw that there. And I'm assuming that plaque is still there. I went back with friends back about 15 years ago, And I think we came up a different way because I don't remember seeing that plaque. But I think it's still there. But you can just walk up the side of the mountain and or the hill. And yeah, me too, Audrey. What good does it do us to believe in those things if we have no way to access them? That that's something that even according to the legends that were written, it was Avalon passed into the mists. And the only time it would surface again would be when Arthur was resurrected. So there's interesting legends connected to all that. When Arthur died at the Battle of Bodden Hill, I think it was, and according to the legends, it was at the hands of his own illegitimate son Mordred that he got his fatal wounds, and the priestess of Avalon is taking him across the waters in the boat through the mists to the Isle of Avalon. And that's according to the legend where Arthur lay in death was the island of Avalon. So it's very interesting stuff. Lord of the Rings, elves and trolls and such fade away. Yeah, that's very true. Teresa said our family clan intermarried with folk from Stonehenge too, which is kind of cool to me. I mean, I learned more about druids. Awesome. Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's very cool stuff. I don't know. I've only traced my ancestry back to the early 1600s in Wales, so it'd be very interesting to see what earlier connections might have been. I don't even know if it's possible to go back any further than that with the records that exist. So, I'm talking more than I'm drinking my coffee. And so, yeah, now that is something to stand there at that place after I had read that novel, of course, so that's all fresh in my mind back in 1990 when I first got there. The magic of that place was unbelievable. You could feel it. It was palpable in the air, even though there were people, tourists, travelers, stopping by. Glastonbury, the town, is like a Wiccan or a pagan ghetto. I mean, it's unbelievable. There's also Arthur's Well, which I did not get a chance to see when we were there. I don't think I knew about it at the time, or we looked for it and we couldn't find it. It's just outside some of the shops in the downtown. There's an ancient well, and that is there. That's been there from time immemorable, and that was a sacred well. And there's something about the sacred wells, and that makes me want to. It's not that I can't talk about this extemporaneously off the top of my head, but there is a thing about the sacred wells, the holy wells. A holy well, and I've got just a little article up in front of me. A holy well or a sacred spring is a well or a spring or other small body of water that are revered either in a Christian or a pagan context, and sometimes both. And the term holy well is commonly employed to refer to any water source of limited size, not a lake or a river, but it includes pools and natural springs and seeps, which has some significance in the folklore of the area where it's located, whether it's in the form of a particular name, an associated legend, the attribution of healing qualities or seer qualities, where you could look into the waters and see the future or see the past. In Christian legend, the water is often said to have been made to flow by the action of a saint or a familiar theme, especially in the hagiography of the Celtic saints. The nomenclature in the etymology is the Heliguel. I can't even pronounce that word. It looks like a Welsh word, which, by the way, I got to say, I connected with a guy that's become a friend. He's an older gentleman in Wales who had read my a lot of my work on Senenmut, and he wanted to connect with me and talk to me about that. And he's from a place in Wales, and we were talking about holy wells in a live chat with he and I the other day. But he was taking me through the pronunciation of some of the Welsh names, which brings me to another point. I know I'm talking about the wells, but before I forget to say this, when I talk about reading and reading only, it seems these days for my work or the commercial aspects of what I do, I'm working on this novel, and I had to. If you saw a post I put up on Facebook a couple of weeks back now, at least, where I said I showed a bunch of pictures of this little town in Wales near Bowood or Bowrood, Boughrod, and Bowrood, and it's near. There's a Celtic name for the place that is. I was writing this paragraph. I was placing a fictional manor house, a house that I made up that goes into the story. It fits with one of the characters in the story. And I had written this: from a bird's eye view, Linwood House held an impressive view of the River Wye and the yawning Bowrood Valley, just a stone's throw from the ancient hamlet of Finninginid and its centuries-old sacred well. That was the opening sentence of that paragraph, of that section of the book. And there's a little town, a little hamlet called Finninginid, or Ginid. He was telling me, put your tongue to the back of your teeth. Ginid is the way to pronounce it. So it's Finninginid. And it's just a little, there's not even really a town there. It's a little tiny hamlet, a little intersection of back roads. And there's an ancient sacred well that is still there. And so I wanted to put this manor house, fictional name, Llynwyd, I think it was pronounced. And Llynwyd House, it's made up a Welsh Gaelic sounding name. And Llyn, he said, means lake, and there's no lake there. It's on the river. So I may have to change this name. This is the research, little bits and pieces of research for a fictional novel. But I made up this manor house, and it has to sit on this hillside over this actual village that sits on the River Wye, W-Y-E, in Wales. And so I place it above the little town of Bowrood, which is a place where you can go. And there's a hill there. There's pastures up on top, trees, and there's nothing there. And I thought this would be a great location for this fictional manor house. Would be on this hill up above the town, and it was overlooking the Wye River. And and I started to look up. I wanted to look up on the map where this was, where would be a good place to put this house. And I just had Google Earth up, and I put it on satellite view, and I started just scrolling through, and I put it on 3D and tipped it a little bit so you could see the terrain. And I started scrolling through and finding a little town and where a nice hill would be. And so I found this hilltop above Bowrood on the River Wye. And I thought, what a perfect place for a manor house. Now, I don't know why the land doesn't have anything there. And there's pastures up on top of the hill, and there's a hill that runs along the side of the river there in the little town. But that's where I put my house for the book, my manor house. And then I took from that terrain, you can go in on Google Earth, and you come in closer, and you can get, and it goes, whoosh, and it puts you down on street level. This is where Google sends out all these cars with the big cameras on top, and they take pictures. I don't know what, every 10 feet, every 100 feet, whatever it is. And you can go down onto street level and see photographs of all the properties, all the exits, all the houses, and stuff like that. And so I went down to street level, and I'm walking through the town, and I'm taking pictures. I took screenshots, and those were some like 15 pictures I put up a couple of weeks ago. And I said, man, I could sure live here. And I actually had a good friend. I think it's a relative of my friend John Ward's. John Ward grew up in Hereford, England, which is just across the border. It's maybe a stone's throw. I don't know, maybe more than a stone's throw, 35 miles or so from this town of Bowrood. And one of his relatives came in and said something to me on that post, and said either they had lived there or they have relatives that live there. And they said, you'd be most welcome there. And Welsh, I guess one of the sayings, according to my friend Nigel, who I talked to the other day, he's in Wales. He's about 80 miles north of Bowrood. And I can't remember the town, Wrekim, Wrekim or something like that. And he said one of the sayings for Wales is everyone is welcome here. And so they were saying you could move here. You should move here. I said I would move my family there in a heartbeat. If all the logistics worked and everything, I could live in a small village like that in the countryside of Wales. Just go look at some pictures of Wales on Google, Wales, for those of you who don't know how to spell it. And you'll see what a beautiful place that is. But that's some of the reading I do. It took me to that. I had to go research where this house stands. Now, will the ancient well in Finnan Quinid ever really come into the story? Yeah, it might. It might come in, but in a small way. It's an ancient well where you can see things into the future. And the main character in the book, he lives in this manor house with his parents, who were former Romani, or were our Romani. They were formerly, his father grew up in the wagon of his grandparents, and they used to travel through Great Britain in the horse-drawn wagons, his grandparents. And his father wanted a different kind of life and made a lot of money developing airplanes before World War I, and then made a killing in World War I, and he bought this old manor house and renamed it. And so, but it's got its ancient name as well. And that's why I wanted to look up and have the book, even though the book is fiction, and I'm doing this with all the Egyptian references in the book and the places in Egypt and the legends and the history that comes into play in the book. I want to make sure that when somebody reads this book, it's not like, well, there couldn't be a manor house above Bowood because there's a factory there, and so instead of that, I want to make sure everything makes sense and makes sense to me, so I can picture that whole world. But that's what I do with my reading. My books that I've written on the Nephilim, the reptilians, Exodus, that all involved reading, but it wasn't recreational reading. Some of it felt a little bit like that, but it was reading for the purpose. And this is getting us back to our original topic I was talking about, and that's how much do you get to read? How much do you get to read for fun? How much do you get to do, if you're an artist, how much do you get to do artwork for fun? Most of my artwork these days is commercial. The way I get to illustrate the most is when I'm doing a job for a client, illustrating a book. I illustrated those freaky Christmas t-shirts, stuff like that. I get to do illustration then. I don't get to sit and just paint. And sometimes it's because you got next month's bills looming over your head. It's like, I can't take time to just sit and paint. I need to be doing something to ensure that I got next month's bills paid. And it's a constant cycle. So you can get trapped in that. I know John Lennon and many others, what was it John Lennon said? Life is that thing that passes you by while you're waiting for it to happen. Now, I'm not waiting for life to happen. I'm making life happen. But sometimes there are things that pass you by, or you're going to let pass you by. And 20 years from now, you'll regret them, that you didn't do them, because you're working so hard to make ends meet or to live in the present and so on. And what am I seeing? Is it a Celerate app? A separate app. Oh, some of you guys are talking about something else. Driving around the towns. Is that a different app, Audrey, you're talking about? You're talking about Google Earth. Google Street View on Oculus 3D headset is fun. Oh, Roger, that sounds cool. The 3D headset. I'd like to do that. I'd love to see that. Now, does it move you in like video, or is it just still the stills and you just see the stills going by you? Oculus 3D. I'll have to take a look at that. That sounds kind of cool. You got to paint the kiddos' Halloween shirts this year. Yeah, there was that. That counts as fun. Well, at the time they had me do that, Rainey asked me, and then had them begging me, and I'm like, oh, I'm busy. I'm doing other stuff, and it's like, how many things that we do are things that we wouldn't have done if somebody didn't pressure us into doing them, and then they become great things and cool memories. I hope my kids remember that. And like right now, it just seems like, Halloween's done. But hopefully when they're 50, they'll remember that. And when they're 50 and I'm dead and gone, and I rather doubt I'll be alive when my son hits 50. Being as I'm 60 right now, my son is 11. In 39 years, when he turns 50, is that right? 39, yeah, 39 years. Will I still be alive? I'd be 99. I'd be 99 years old when he turns 50. I think that's right. Yeah, because he was born when I was like 48 or 49, something like that. So I'm just bad at math. So I might still be around when my son turns 50. The only sadness that I have about my impending death someday is the sadness my kids would have to go through of losing their dad. What's a good age to lose a parent? Is it 10? I know a lot of people who've lost their parents when they were young kids. And they say, I don't really have any memory of my dad. I remember him and I remember his face, but I don't, I was 5 when he died, or I was 8 when he died. So maybe it's easier on kids that way. What happens when you live your life and you know your parent? What if you're like me and I'm 60 and my mom is 78? My mom was 18 years old when I was born. So my mom's 78 years old. My dad is 80. I think he's 81 in January. He's either 81 or 82 in January. He's 2 or 3 years older than my mom, something like that. My mom will be 79 in July. My dad, I think, will be 82 in January. And they're both still alive. And so they haven't lived with each other for almost 60 years. They haven't even seen each other's faces in the last 59 years, my mom and dad. Never talked to each other, never saw each other. My dad was remarried probably about 57, 58 years ago. And so, not to give away any of my dad's secrets or anything like that, or my mom's, just talking about family history. And so, so my dad, I got to give him a call, come to think of it. I think he called me once. I saw a call in my call logs from like a week ago or something. And I'm like, oh no, I missed his call. So, but I don't know how I got on parents there, but there we go. So I could move to Wales. I could move to a small village. Maybe I'd move there and go, what the hell did I do? I envision myself, I used to a long time ago envision myself living in, and this is before I knew Rainey. So this is 20, 25 years ago. I used to think about it. I'd think, when I get a little older, I'm going to get out of town. Maybe I'll move to like the Isle of Arran, Arran, in the Irish Sea, off the coast of Scotland. And maybe I'll move to that big island and a little village there. And, like the Yeatsian 9 bean rows will I have there in a hive for the honeybee, and live alone in the bee-loud glade. In this cottage of clay and wattle is made, according to his poem, the Lake Isle of Innisfree. And I thought that'd be great. And then you walk down to the pub every night. But then I thought I'd still always be the outsider. I didn't grow up there. I'm not Scottish. I would probably always be seen as the American. Would I fit in a little village like that? Would I want to fit in for villages that have been there for generations, and go down to the pub every night? Oh, the American upstart who lifted his roots and came over here, and what's he doing here? And he likes to come down to the pub and hang out. I don't know. Maybe I'd fit right in. Maybe it'd be very welcoming. I don't know. But that's what I think when I looked at that little town in Wales. It's going to be a great place to go. Audrey wants to get an Oculus set. My friend was telling me about a game he loves playing, and it's something about the sky. Now, I don't play games. I don't have time for them. I've watched a friend play. It was Assassin's Creed in Egypt, and I heard that was very well done, and it was amazing. There are Egyptologists that have come back and had high acclaim for that game, and it was crazy. So who cares what they think about you? You live your best life and you live it your way. Well, yeah, that's the way I think too, Audrey. I wouldn't not do it because I'd be afraid of what somebody would say. That's for certain. I'd go and I'd enjoy it. I'd go and then when I had people from over there in Wales telling me, "You're welcome here. You should come. You could move here." And I said, "You know what? I would do that. I'd have a tough time prying my wife away from her family, which is all about 45 minutes from here. Everybody lives, a whole cluster of her family up there. And are you talking about Teresa, the quiet man? Let's see, which book, which book, Kelly Bolt, are you talking about? But anyway, I think you could explore Egypt in great detail with an Oculus. I think that'd be very cool, Roger. I'd have to look into that. Oh, Mists of Avalon. Definitely get it, Kelly. It's so worth reading. It's a really, but be, be, I was just looking at something was moving on my screen and I wasn't sure what it was. Be prepared to, if you let your brain sink into it, it could challenge you a bit on belief systems and things like that. So it's a very interesting book. I don't remember quite how it does it. I just remember what it did for me. So, Roger, I got to look into that. I don't even know what an Oculus is, even though I've heard the name before. I don't know what it is. So, but maybe do more reading. Take some time to do more reading. That would be, wouldn't that be a goal for all of us? Maybe you got New Year's coming up in what, 2 weeks? New Year's Eve coming up. Time of resolutions. I don't believe in resolutions, mostly because I just think they're silly. Resolutions are made to be broken, right? And they usually focus on, I'm going to eat less, I'm going to diet more, I'm going to lose that ugly 40 pounds, I'm going to exercise more, I'm going to do this for my family. And we make resolutions sometimes out of the emotion of it. But I would say make a life change. Maybe say in 2021, I'm going to read more books. How about that? Could you say in the last calendar year that you've read one book from cover to cover? Have you read one book from cover to cover? You know what? I haven't. I've read lots of books. I've started lots of books. Well, I take that back. I've read books cover to cover for my kids. But that's different. And now I enjoy that. That's recreational reading. Sometimes I get to read because I read to my kids. And I don't read as much to them anymore. My kids aren't as interested in having me read. And I'm almost to that point where I'm going to say, I'm going to legislate it in my house. Executive order. We will have reading time at 7:00 in the evening. And we'll read for an hour, 45 minutes to an hour, whatever it takes. And it's funny, sometimes my kids, they'll bristle. They want to go watch TV shows for bedtime. And I'm like, no, I want to read to you tonight. So we're going to start. We'll sit down on the sofa, we'll read. And my son loves it. My son loves to be read to. Even though he'll object at first, he loves to be read to. And he loves the stories we've read. And I've mentioned that a couple of times in the past. The books we've read. One of the books I think that made a big impact on him, or as big in his remembrance, is John Carter of Mars by Edgar Rice Burroughs. We read that book, and he really enjoyed that book. And we started reading the second one and never got too far. We read The Hobbit together, which is a very different book than reading Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is pretty intense compared to The Hobbit. And so what's only mine? Only yours. All your books well. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Teresa. I appreciate that. I read To Kill a Mockingbird to my kids. I hadn't read that in decades. And I picked it up and read it. And some of it was so familiar in my mind from 30 years ago, 40 years ago, that it stood right out, and I heard it all over again as if I just read it yesterday. Other parts I didn't remember at all. But that was one of my very favorite books and novels. And I wasn't a reader when I was a kid. I hated reading. When we read that in 9th grade literature class, we were supposed to read a chapter. Well, the teacher, she would read the book to us on certain days of the week. And so I used to not read the books because I hated reading. And I would just pick up all the information I needed to as we were discussing it for a test in class. And then she would read the book. And so I heard the book in her voice. Hey, Princes of Ireland is a good boom, you all. Princes of Ireland, good book. Well, thanks, Teresa. So, yeah, I hated reading. The first time I really started reading, to tell you the truth, was when I left college in 1980. And I stayed at my mom's house for about 6 months after that, before I got my own place. 4 to 6 months, something like that. And because I was home from college, I was gone at college for 2 to 3 years. And I went right back home after that, where I'd grown up. And I was there for a while, and then I finally got my own apartment. But there was a few weeks in there where I didn't have a job, and I was sitting at home and recuperating from school. And I got a whole stack from the library of these Star Trek books. Kirk, Spock, and McCoy era, all the little novels that were written, some of them off the TV shows, others were just extra novels that were written. And they had that whole series. There's got to be hundreds of those books from the late 60s into the 70s and the 80s. And so I sat there and I just devoured those. I spent a whole week or two just reading and filling my mind with that. Roger says, I recently put all your Tam O'Hare videos from about 1.5 years ago in a playlist for Kinsey. She's been enjoying watching you read that story to her. Ah, great. Thank you, Roger. I hope that's enjoyable for her. Princes of Ireland. I'm going to have to see which one that is. Oh, that's another one I read. Was it Morgan Llewellyn who wrote this as well? The Lion of Ireland. It's all about Brian Boru, the first High King of Ireland. I mean, and we're talking back in, I don't even remember the era he lived, but their main enemies were the Vikings. So it had to be, the 800s to the thousands, somewhere in there. So a book about Brian Boru, well worth reading. That's a Morgan Llewellyn book, I believe. Historical fiction. It's about a real guy. So fantastic book. And now when I read now, I don't always like reading a novel, because I thought, if I'm going to spend my time reading, I want to learn something. I want to pick something up. I like to read biographies. I like to read about history. I was reading a book about the Founding Fathers and the things that they stood for. I was reading a book it's by one of the Fox News commentators. I can't remember his name. Jared is his last name, I think. But he was writing about the whole Russian collusion thing. And so I was reading his take on all of that. And so reading those kinds of books, I feel like I'm gaining information. And Star Trek novels. Yeah, they were fantastic. Oh, I hear people moving upstairs. In about 10 minutes, we'll be done here because I'm going to have to go get my kids ready to go to school. We leave in about 40 minutes for school. So 7 to 7:30 is chaos point time in the Roberts household. It's waking everybody up, which Rainey, I think probably the alarm for the kids, I think, went off about 20 minutes ago. And she lets it go off and then puts it on snooze and go off. And so it wakes them up supposedly, in theory, slowly. So by 7 o'clock, they're ready to jump out of bed. Fantasyland. So let's see. Which book did you read? I learned a word this morning, pejorative. Yeah, it's a good word. Let's see, lots of these Star Trek novels. Yeah. And so anyway, read a good book. Set that up as your New Year's resolution. You know, that feels like a comfortable resolution, which is okay. So I'm going to read more this year. I'm going to read a book. I will read at least one book cover to cover this year, tell yourself. And maybe that'll turn into 2 or 3 or 4. So I think reading reading expands your vocabulary when you're younger, even when you're older. It expands. It's the way you talk, the way you think. A lot of the things I write, the pictures I draw, they're all pictures that are created in my head because of the things I've read. Right now I'm working on the 10 Breaths of Ra, whose title may change. Working it because there's so many elements I'm throwing into that book that didn't exist when I first conceived it. And so it may end up being something else, but it takes place in Egypt. And I see all the things that were the pop cultural motivation when I was a kid, the things that are instilled in my brain from watching movies and watching television shows and reading the books I did read as I got a little older. All those things are set in my mind as to how things should be worded, how to say things, how to... I like to, as you know me, it's hard to do a radio show or a podcast or a broadcast of any kind and not be somebody who likes to talk. So you know me, I like to talk. I know how to talk. I try to refine the way I talk. But when I paint a picture or draw a picture, I illustrate, or I talk in illustration. When I write, I illustrate with words. So I want, when people read my work, I want them to feel what I'm writing. If I were to sit here right now, and I know I read this once before, the very opening of my book, The 10 Breaths of Ra. I've got the manuscript is sitting open here on my computer because I'm working on it all the time. It starts like this. I said, winter in the desert climes of Egypt could almost be considered pleasant. The blistering heat of the midday sun, reflecting off the rocks and the sand, had the effect of creating an atmosphere that was nothing short of the inside of a cook oven. But during these milder months, the heat subsided to the comfort of an afternoon at the beach, and one might even find the need for a jumper and a scarf to ward off the brisk, cool air between the swallowing and rebirth of Ra, the name the ancient Egyptians gave for the god of the sun. And donning her scarf, but leaving her woolly sweater draped over the canvas-backed chair at her desk, Dr. Eileen Byrne drew back the flap of the Bedouin tent given her by the local sheikh, a crafty yet gentlemanly old codger whose religion forbade him look on an infidel female, but who also had the loving heart of a cherished old uncle. The air that rushed in smelled of campfire and goats and a mixture of spicy incense and pungent shisha. The woven doorway was a portal to a world so unlike Eileen's native Ireland, a threshold to level sands stretching out as far as her eyes could see. The sun, a blazing pink ball, was just peeking over the crest of the distant low mountains, illuminating the sand dust with a pinkish gold haze that drew her mind to a childhood's stories of faraway realms of the Fae and their magical mists. There's those mists, Teresa. So that's how I like to write. I want to write so the reader is going to get a picture in their mind of what I'm seeing. Because when I'm writing a story, I can close my eyes and I can see the whole atmosphere. One of the dangers of writing is writing a story where you know all the details and all the backstories. And if I've got a character that just walks through the marketplace and drops a note in somebody's lap, and that's the only time you see him in the book, I know this guy. I know who he is. I know his whole background because it's all constructed in my head. I know what the marketplace looks like. I could tell you that the marketplace, it's cramped, it's narrow. You couldn't fit a car through there. It's cobbled streets. It's overhangs of all kinds of fabrics. You're sitting at a table with a cloth spread over it, a round table, small, made for 2 cups of Egyptian coffee, and somebody crowds through and drops something on your plate. You don't even see his face, and it's a note. It's a letter that's sealed with a wax seal. I could describe that whole thing. I could describe all the markets. I could describe the birds in the air. I could describe everything. And sometimes you get so descriptive in writing, you lose the story. So you have to be very careful. So you try to talk about the setting. It's like where I read to you this morning, that place that involved the old sacred well. From a bird's eye view, Linwood House held an impressive view of the River Wye and the yawning Bowrood Valley, just a stone's throw from the ancient hamlet of Finn and Gwynedd and its centuries-old sacred well. It's said that an ancient Roman fort lay beneath the foundation of the ancient manor house, that nearly 2,000 years of ghosts walked its halls. That, frankly, was the dark charm and appeal the place held for Badcock when he acquired it. Coming from a long line of Romani, he was the first to settle permanently, retiring his ponies and wagon and sinking his feet into the Welsh hillside. The realization of this, his amassed fortune, acquired with the making of aeroplanes before and during the war. As new aristocracy, it was incumbent upon him to give his young son, Daniel, the best he could afford. And Daniel Badcock spent the bulk of his teen years in the lap of luxury, with little to remind him of the more humble days of his grandparents. And so that's the way you can fit backstory in a couple of sentences without going so deep that you get off the track of the story. And so there it is. And that's the way I write. I write to paint pictures in words, so the reader enjoys it and can be sunk into the world that I'm creating. There are scenes where I've never been up in a biplane or a triplane, a World War I era open cockpit plane, but I imagine it. And there's a scene where, because Daniel Badcock's father built aeroplanes, in the book, he's got 3 replicas of the model of plane that was the Red Baron's plane, and in World War I. And Daniel goes to his father's factory and the warehouse there, and he steals one of these planes because he has to fly to Egypt from England, and he does this, and he ends up crashing it, but I'm not giving away too much of the story there. But to write about picturesquely, so the reader understands the feel of climbing up into this plane and sitting in this leather seat and the wind in their face, and the way you can see the earth below from the cockpit of this plane. And so you have to imagine that, but trying to write that way and not sound so flamboyant with your words that it's impossible to read or that it makes no sense, but to write in such a way that it flows and it carries the reader through the story, and they picture it in their mind. Not just the dialogue. The dialogue's very important, the dialogue between the characters. So you got to write narrative and dialogue, because the dialogue carries the story. But the rest is the B-roll stuff. in movies. It's setting the atmosphere so people can enjoy it. So anyway, there you go. You know what time it is, folks? It's 7 o'clock. And I hope you had a good coffee hour with me in the morning. I could go on and on and on. We could broadcast all day and take a couple of breaks for lunch. But I will see you tonight. The Intrepid radio program comes on at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, Monday through Friday. It's Friday, and so this is the last day of the week. We're going to pick up talking about the language of holiness, or the holy language. We're going to talk about that. We'll have more of our Spark Courage to talk about, ways to be bold in life, and anything else that might happen during the day today. So it's good to see you all. Thanks for joining me this morning. Roger, Kelly, Teresa, Audrey. I thought I saw a couple of other people early on, and maybe I'm wrong. I think, I don't know if Doug made it in or not today. He sent me a message, but I don't know if he made it in this morning, and that's okay if he didn't. So all of you, thanks for being members. If you're up for it and you want to share the membership with other people, hey, go become a member over at Scotty's page. There's cool stuff. That would be nice and helpful. I appreciate it. And as for now, thank you for your time. I had a good time sitting here. Maybe we are going to have to do something with members only that becomes a Zoom channel where we can all hook up with video and have conversation. Reading comments over here in the chat room is one thing, but all of us being able to talk together it could be an interesting thing. So we'll talk about that as time comes up. And so everybody have a good day. It's 7:01. I got to blast off and go get my kids ready with Rainey for school and get them off to school. And you all have a good day, and I'll see you tonight right here. See you later. End stream. Bye.